Hey y'all, this is the Aiming Arrows podcast, by parents for parents, to have real conversations and find real biblical truth as we parent on mission to raise up the next generation of fully devoted followers of Christ. Hey y'all, welcome back to the Aiming Arrows podcast. You're here with your host, Andre Sampson, and my awesome co-host,
Morgan Buchek.
Yes, and we are so excited to jump in this week and talk about the fun topic of serving and how do you serve with your kids? How do you teach your kids the value of serving? All that fun stuff.
Yep. And so to join us, we've got Cole and Kurt McClellan. So if you've been around here for any length of time, you've probably heard their names. And also Beth McClellan is Kurt's wife. And you guys are, honestly, when I think about like y'all's family, I mean, you guys serve like crazy. So Kurt is an elder here. Cole serves with sophomore boys. He's been there since they were in 6th grade, and I have a sophomore boy, so I am forever indebted to all the time and energy he has spent on this crowd of boys. And then Beth, I mean, on any given Sunday, like she's serving with kids. She pours out so much time and energy with Kara on OCC at Christmas time, Operation Christmas Child. So were you guys just like born servants? Actually, let me ask you, when did you and Beth get married?
We got married in 1989.
Okay, so 1989, did you guys decide like right then, all right, this is what we're about, this is what we're going to do? Was that like something y'all decided early on?
No, I think probably we were like most couples, just trying to figure out what marriage was about and how to survive that. But I think over time, we kind of started discovering each other's gifts, and we both loved to help and others and to give or host things and any kind of service like that. We enjoyed doing it together. And so, yeah, that started early. And so we've just done it that way for a long time.
Now, were y'all believers when you first got married?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
We were. We both were raised in Christian homes, and which is just truly a blessing. And met our freshman year at Abilene Christian University. We were there. As freshmen, I needed a date to the Christmas social. So December 5th, 1989, 1985 was our first date.
Okay. Wow.
And we went to a freshman Christmas social.
That's awesome.
Have been on lots of dates since then.
Okay. Tell us about your kids. When did you start having kids? What are their names, ages, all that?
Yeah. So we have 3 sons, and Cole is our oldest. Cole is married to Greta, who many probably listening know Greta. Greta serves with Cole in youth.
Yeah, girls, 10th grade girls.
At CityBridge. And so Cole has himself now 4 girls. And so those are 4 of our 8 grandchildren are with Cole. And Greta, we actually did life with them. So Cole and Greta, it feels like we kind of raised them.
Greta's family?
Greta's family.
Okay,
we were in community with the Pittman family.
Okay.
Early on, there were like 9 boys Cole's age in our community group and 1 girl, and it was Greta.
Love it.
And so she had her pick, and somehow she still picked Cole.
What a blessing. That's what I mean, you joke about that with like little, play groups, like, oh, they'd be so cute together. Yes. But like, once you have kids, you're kind of like, no, they actually really would be. How can we figure this out? You know, you don't think you're for arranged marriages until you have children.
Yes. And what a blessing. I remember Beth, Greta, when she was like 6 years old or 7 years old, she was complaining that she never got mail, and all of her sisters, she's the youngest of 7.
Wow.
They all were getting mail and letters and things like that. So Beth went home and wrote Greta a letter. And it kicked off this little pen pal relationship for probably 6 or 7 years. They wrote back and forth. And we had no idea at the time that Greta would end up being our daughter-in-law.
I love that.
But
yeah, she still has all the letters.
Yeah.
Wow.
Awesome.
Isn't that funny?
That is precious.
So that's Cole.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And then our middle son is Samuel. He and his wife, Abigail, live in Abilene. Sam is 29. And they just live in Clyde, just outside of Abilene. They also have 4 kids.
Okay.
And similar to Cole and Greta, I think Sam and Abigail started liking each other in the 7th grade. And, kind of a very similar thing. We were all at Lucas Christian Academy together. Mike and I served on the board of directors there for a really long time.
Okay.
And so we knew their family well and kind of got to raise those two together as well. That was super fun.
That's awesome.
And then our youngest son is Connor. Connor is 27.
Okay.
He lives in Allen, and he is not married, but he is engaged. He's getting married on June 16th of this year to Leah. And Leah's awesome. She's living with us right now. Such a blessing because, she needed a place to be. And we were like, hey, our place would be great. And it's given us a chance. We didn't get to know her like we did our other two daughters.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So what a blessing. We've been able to just pray with her, been able to visit with her in ways that we would not have done, had
awesome.
the Lord not provided this chance. So it's been great. Yeah.
That's so cool.
That's really, really cool. Gosh.
Cole, we got to hear some about your family, but tell us more about all the girls, all the fun stuff.
Oh yeah, so much fun. So different than I thought life would look like. I would never have thought we'd have 4 girls. It's been an absolute blast. So Greta and I, we got married senior year of college, and we were Abilene Christian, and then we moved back to Dallas. We actually lived with my parents for maybe a couple of months, bought a house in Allen, and then pretty much just started having kids right away. We were pregnant whenever we moved back. And so, yeah, we have Kimberly's our oldest. She's 8. And then our youngest is Madeline. She's 1.5. But they're just so much fun. I mean, they've been super sweet, definitely grown in gentleness, patience, tenderness, lots of fun ways. But it's just been a blast.
That's so fun. Okay, so as we talk about this subject, we talk about serving. We always want to start with why is it so important that we talk about serving on a parenting podcast? What do y'all think? Why is this an important subject to talk through?
You want to hit that first?
Sure, I will. I think it's such a great question. To me, it goes back to what's the purpose of parenting. And whenever I think about, right, you've got so many scriptures that would inform that. Train up a child in the way he should go, right? And what is that, right? It's, you think about Deuteronomy 6 and how you're just supposed to write the Lord's, just his law and purpose and make sure that you're ingraining that into your family rhythms. And so for me, it's really comes down to creating and encouraging children to have a relationship with Jesus and that they would look like Jesus one day. That's the whole goal of parenting.
Right.
And so then why would you talk about service? You think about why Jesus came down to the earth. Mark 10, 45, I think, tells us that Jesus came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life for a ransom, as a ransom for many. And so to me, it's the whole purpose of why Jesus came down here. And if we're called to look like Jesus and raise our kids to look like Jesus, service is a huge part of that. And so I think that for me is why it's just really important to talk about service. I don't know. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah,
there?
I would say, when I think about this topic, just generally speaking, it's really hard to not tie it to what's your relationship with the Lord yourself as, individually. If you're not in a spot where you're devoting time daily with the Lord or spending time with him, it's really hard to portray or convey an authentic life of service, which to me is more stewardship of our time, our money, our talent, and gifts, towards things that honor and please the Lord. So it's more living in response to God's gift to us and his grace on us, to extend that to others, as the Bible teaches us to do.
Yep.
So I think it's important if you're going to, you're always, your whole life's a testimony. No matter what you're doing, you're testifying to something. And so, as a believer, I know that my relationship with Jesus is the most important thing in my life. And so if I can't really convey that and communicate that in all the things I'm doing, then what am I communicating?
Right.
And so, it matters because I think there's more caught necessarily than is directly taught. And so living a life that honor and pleases the Lord, I think, is going to include service and probably a lot of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what did that look like for y'all? Let's talk about like when the kids were little, like how were, like what were some ways you incorporated it into your life that you really gave a lot of thought to, or that you really didn't give a lot of thought to? It was just like, well, yeah, this is just what we do.
Yeah, I thought about this before this podcast. I think there were, when they were little, it looked very different than it did when they were in middle school and as teenagers. Mm-hmm. But as little kids, we would have friends come over and they would fall in love with the toy that the boys had and not want to give it up. And we would say, just take it home with you. We'll get it back when you're through playing with it. And, dealing with tears after that they didn't have whatever it was. So when they're really little, you can start just by being generous. A lot of times we were around people, our boys had lots of toys and they had lots of things and they had grandparents that were giving them things all the time. And so, to take and share those things was something we instilled in them early. And it got to where they kind of expected it, or they would start offering it up. You can take it and you can play with it and I can get it later. Whenever you're through playing with it,
That's amazing.
I think the other thing we would always do at Christmas time was always a time when, we would have a small Christmas with our boys and then the grandparents would give them things. And so we would, in like November every year, through lots of tears, we would give them a trash bag and we would say, go in your toy closet and like fill up this bag of toys you don't play with. If you haven't played with it in the last, couple of weeks or whatever, put it in here and we're going to take it and either find somebody who wants these toys or can use them, or we're going to take it to Goodwill or wherever. But we did that every single year with them and just tried to keep things to a minimum. And I think that did two things. Our boys always, each other was the most interesting thing they had to play with. Mm-hmm. And then, they had things to play with too, but it wasn't over the top excessive. Mm-hmm. And I think it would have been if we just held on to things and never let them go. So when you're little, those are things we did. And then it's all the things that you just naturally do when you see a need. I had bought Beth, because I got a really great deal on it, a vehicle that had like a DVD player, which at the time was really something. If you had something like that, that was like pretty cool. And we constantly had friends, they'd be taking a trip. We had a family of like 6 that they were driving to Canada for the holidays. And we just said, hey, take our car. And, we would take their car and drive it. And for our boys, it was like, oh, now we can't watch movies, or now we can't do this or that. But they started to really enjoy getting to drive these different cars and do different, we loved it when we borrowed. One time we let the Pittmans take our car somewhere. I can't remember where they took it. And our boys loved it because they had a Suburban that had a bench seat up front without airbags. And it was like, we can all sit in the front, And so
it was awesome.
Like little things like that, I think, just kind of convey to them what it is to give up and things and serve.
And that makes sense when they're little because they're so attached to stuff, and so like helping them have loose hands with stuff. And like one thing I would always tell my kids was like, hey, that's God's, like everything belongs to the Lord. And so then they would use it against me and they'd be like, no, we can't have that. And I'd be like, well, that's his. No, it's not. It's God's. Yeah. Okay.
We'll help you with this, because I think even as you're thinking through it, it's interesting that we want to talk about serving, and then you start with generosity. And one of the things you mentioned was this is just part of stewardship for you.
Yes.
And so could you unpack that a little bit more? Help me connect those two dots. If I'm going, I thought serving was over here and stewardship's over here. How are those related? How are those the same thing?
I was thinking about this earlier, where, let me find it here. 1 Peter 4:10 says, as each has received a gift, use it to serve one another as stewards of God's varied grace. So when you think about, for me, that verse just kind of unpacks it a little more. Mm-hmm. When you think about the fact that everything we have is truly a gift from the Lord, and it's His provision in our lives, but it's not meant to just be consumed. Mm-hmm. That isn't the model that Jesus set for us. Cole talked about Mark 10 earlier. Jesus himself came to serve and to give his life. And so if we can give of things to show others God's love, then that is typically done through service. We a lot of times we didn't have just money to give. And so it was looking at our time or at our energy. We would seek opportunities. I can remember, I ran a lot when the boys were young, and I had a big double stroller, and Cole had a bike, and I would push two of them and Cole would ride along, and we'd go for 5 or 6 miles, and we'd be out. One time we were out and there were some horses that had gotten out where we lived, and it was like a chance to help a neighbor, right? And so we would look for things like that to round up those horses. It was kind of scary, that particular one, because they were horses that didn't want to be controlled. But jumping in there or seeing a neighbor struggling through something outside and us just going and helping, those are things we could give. And especially when your kids start to point out things that need done or that they can see, you can start to see the return of that blessing, and that they're kind of getting it. When they're little, they really do. They want to help. I think it's a natural desire. They're not so consumed with themselves all the time that they see a chance to help somebody else, and they really want to do that.
And they want to help with you.
Yes.
Well, let's fast forward to like middle school years. Cole, I'm sure always, probably not your brothers, but you always served with joy and enthusiasm and gratitude to your parents for giving you the opportunity, right?
Oh yeah, always, right? No, I think that it was so much a part of our lives, and it was a non-negotiable part of our lives. Yeah. So it really didn't matter what the attitude that I had coming into it was. We were going to be doing these things because as a part of our family values is that we serve. And so it almost, I don't think that they really cared very much what we felt like about the service. But I will say, I think seeing them serve with such a positive attitude, that's very infectious. And so it bled off, and we actually enjoyed a lot of the service. It was for me, I just think about, you talked about, hey, we've been blessed, but why? That was kind of maybe a mantra growing up, but what's the purpose of the blessings that we have? Are we going to use them for ourselves, or are we going to use them to bless other people? And so that's kind of what I think about, especially in middle school. For example, I think about opening your home up for Friday night lights or live, or I can't remember what it's called, but essentially the entire school to come over and have a Bible study. And what was so cool about that, they were always like, oh, if stuff gets spilled on the carpets, it's fine. If stuff, if the walls end up, the drywall ends up getting holes in it, it's okay. Somebody shoots the glass out of the backboard, right? It's fine. All things that have happened growing up, but they held on to things so loosely. And their attitude was, hey, we have received certain blessings and benefits, and we get to share those with other people. And so it was very much, even though there were times, especially, waking up early, going out and serving, that, probably was not excited to do that. But when you see somebody else and the person you're serving alongside of has such a positive attitude about it, it really makes you have a positive attitude about it. So I don't remember being, overly negative. I'm sure I was at times, but I think the reason I wasn't was because of the attitude that you or mom came into the service with, and that definitely rubs off.
I think that's really important. Kids love to serve with their parents, and it's so true. Follow me as I follow Christ. Like, do it with me, so.
Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things you said was almost like there wasn't one thing that kind of did it.
Right.
I think oftentimes as a parent, I think through, how do I teach this to my kids? I'm looking for essentially a silver bullet. I'm going, what's the right Devo? What's the right memory verse? What's the right book to read? And what I'm hearing you say is, well, one, the way you began talking about serving, I'd go, man, if I could have my kids talk about serving like that one day, mission accomplished. And I want to know how, and I start looking for the silver bullet. But I'm hearing you say, hey, it's not we sat down and did this one Devo and then the light bulbs went off. It was a consistent daily family culture of serving. And I'm going, how did you guys do that? Was that just, this is who we are, this is how we live? Like, what were some of the sacrifices, I guess, you had to make to have kids spilling stuff on your carpet or to be up early in the morning? Like, how did you choose that when there's so many other things in life to invest in, or to take your time with 3 boys?
Well, immediately I think I look at what the Lord's done for me and his patience towards me. And it's those things seem super inconsequential and like a small give when I think about the grace I've been given. But I think, there were times when they just, like again or now, like I wanted to do this instead. I remember very specifically, we had, you mentioned OCC. Yeah. Operation Christmas Child has been part of our family for Cole's whole life. Like we've done it for over 25 years.
Wow.
Probably closer to 30 that we've actually been at some level involved with Operation Christmas Child. And one of the things we did, the boys were, I think, in high school. We signed up because why wouldn't we, to go work at the warehouse one year. And Cole's attitude was good. Our middle son, Sam, like he was having none of it. Like the only thing that was good with him was that we were going to eat at Fuddruckers before we went to the warehouse to do the work. And so he was just really negative and such a downer, but we just kept kind of pressing through. And, when you go, they show you a video and they kind of show you the impact that boxes have in communities and with some of the kids. And, that starts to stir you a little bit. So he was exposed to some of that. And then you walk into this super energetic warehouse where people are there serving because they want to be there. And we kind of gave Sam a job that we thought, hey, like, he will have less impact on the attitude of others if we put him
in a closet with the sauce.
Well, we put him at the end of the assembly line. So he would tape a final carton and scan it.
Scan gun's fun.
The scan gun's kind of fun. And we were like, maybe this will like get him out of our hair a little bit. And so we put him on it. Well, he started to really like feel like in command and control. Having the scan gun and being at the end of the process. And we get to that night, happened to be the last night. The processing center was open and operating, and they were trying to get to 1 million boxes packed.
Wow.
Out of that facility. And we happened to be there. It was like 9:30 at night and the 1,000,000th box came through. And so they grabbed Sam and his gun and the whole warehouse came over. And, he, of course, hammed it up big time to get to scan that last box. And, then he talked about it all the way home. Like, man, that was so cool. I got to scan the 1,000,000th box. And so, I mean, just God's favor on those little things to have him get there and start to turn his attitude around. I think for him, it probably felt like a sacrifice. But
for sure, I'm sure he had video games to play at home.
He had other things to, video games would be a whole nother podcast for our family.
Okay.
But yeah, for sure. He had many other things to do. Yeah.
Okay. So Cole, what do you remember? Like, what do you like? Okay. I remember. And like, when did you start to own it yourself? Would you say like not till adulthood, after college?
Adulthood, for sure. Okay. Adulthood. I feel like I always enjoyed going out and serving, but I didn't really seek to do it because my family did it so much. I was like, I'll pick it up with them. But then really in college for me is whenever I feel like, okay, I started to own it. And I think it came back to just an understanding of how much Jesus has done for me and really an outpouring of thankfulness for that. And it's a really motivating place to serve from. And so like I can think of going to college and then doing World's Backyard and playing with kids that, they've got kind of a rough background, not a lot to do after school. And so you have the opportunity to go hang out with these kids, play with them, share the gospel with them. And I just remember being so encouraged by that and seeing so much growth there. And I also just realizing, man, I think about myself a lot less whenever I'm serving other people. Yeah. And it's kind of a freeing experience to think about other people versus yourself. And so I think that it was these kind of drippings, that filled up that bucket little by little by little by little to the point of me realizing, I'm going to be about this too. It was done for me in high school, middle school, but afterwards starting to realize, oh, wow, if this is going to be something that I'm going to be about, I've got to go do it. I can't just go do it whenever I'm back home. So lots of really good memories from just being in middle school and high school. And I think the biggest thing for me that stuck out, the memory that I have is I think back about my parents and when did they do things for themselves? And I can't really remember any time that they did really anything for themselves. And I see how fulfilled their life is. And so I think that it's a little hard to comprehend that in middle school and in high school, but you begin to see it the farther you are away from it. And so I just think about, and I think about my in-laws too, Ron and Cindy, the exact same way. Such a fulfilled, purpose-driven life. I can't, you guys and them, I can't imagine they'd say we've been the most, they'd say we've been the most blessed people that we could ever imagine. Not because they have all these things, but because their lives are just so full. And they just have such thankful hearts about everything that they do. So it's been really, really fun to look back and see it. Cause I'm not thinking about that in the moment in middle school or high school. I just don't think about that at all.
It's such a blessing. Like, just to add on to that, like, for Beth and I to, go from kind of making them do Operation Christmas Child, just to take that example.
Oh yeah. Like the season I'm in right now.
Yeah. To where, both Cole and Sam, both their families pack lots of boxes, to watch Cole and Greta pull up with their Suburban and have, 60 boxes that their little family of 4 packed this year, and to get those out of their car. And, and we know those girls made crafts to go in those boxes. Our granddaughters are all over packing boxes. It's all they want to do. Fun. And I mean, just to see God, it's generational, and it's contagious. Mm-hmm. And so, praise the Lord, we've been able to kind of see something little like that holds a value for us, because we know the gospel presentation is made to every child who receives a box. Mm-hmm. So for us, that's huge. Those are places we couldn't get to, and couldn't have that conversation with those kids, but we know that happens through that program. Mm-hmm. So, it's just a great example of, watching the Lord faithfully return that. And for us, like, that's 1,000 times, return on our quote investment. Yes. And so press on, persevere. You do have to make your kids do things.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
But
that's huge. I think in my head sometimes, like, okay, my 14-year-old kid right now, like, doesn't like this, but 35, like, I'm parenting for the 35-year-old that will look back and go, okay, I get that now. So it really is for the long haul, like, just walking in obedience. And I think it's also important. I read an article a long time ago about how if parents are serving, if they're not connecting it to the gospel, sometimes kids will grow up, and this may be for more like the, non-church, de-churched, but like, they just think, oh, my parents are nice. They don't really connect it to, hey, we're doing this because of what God's done for us. Like, this is part and parcel of the Christian life. So I think that's super important.
Here's a question I have is as you're saying, hey, you do have to make your kids serve sometimes and bring them along even if they don't want to. And I've heard this for different things, or a question can be, do I force my kid to serve, or do I force them to come to church all the time? Won't that make them resent church or resent serving? What would you say to somebody that's wrestling with that a little bit?
I mean, I would say, I think immediately about Elizabeth Elliot, who wrote one time, talking about her parents and how they raised them as a family. And she said, my parents couldn't make us listen in church, but they could put us in a posture where we could hear. And so, like, to apply that here, I think I couldn't make Cole or Sam or Connor or anybody want to serve, but I can create the opportunity, and I can provide that point for them to make a good choice. And to invest and to do it and to bring them along. And sometimes, I've denied other things that would have been pleasurable to them because we were requiring something else of them in a given moment. I know it's really hard, and sometimes it's really inconvenient. I can think one of the things that our family did, Beth had gone to Africa, to Uganda, on a mission trip. And while she was there, she was there was a terror threat at the Entebbe airport while she was there, and she had to stay longer, and she was by herself. I wasn't with her. And the people there gave their best to Beth. Like meat for them would be like a gourmet meal. They made sure there was meat every day for Beth and the team she was with. And were so hospitable to her. And she came back thinking, wow, I felt God's mercy and his love for me. I didn't go expecting that, but it's something I received. Yeah. And so she literally came back and she told me, like, the first night she was back, if we have the opportunity to love and serve someone like I was loved and served, I want to do it. And I was like, amen. I'm so thankful they did that for you. Let's find an opportunity to do something like this. I kid you not, it was that Sunday. Our church said, hey, we have these students from China that are coming in. They need a place to live for a couple of weeks until they can get their utilities on in their apartment, get their cell phone, get their bank account set up. And so we were like, hey, Cole was heading off to college. The boys were all talking about who was going to get his room. Yeah. And because Connor and Samuel were sharing a room. So they were like they love Cole, but they're very happy for Cole to be going.
Chomping at the bits.
And now we're like bringing somebody else into our home, who happened to be a student named Chong Long. And one of the coolest guys we've ever met. I think our whole family would say that.
Could he speak English?
Yes, he could speak English. But he came into our home and we just started pouring out into him, inviting him to church, and and it started this thing with our family that has been probably for 8 to 10 years. We served in the Chinese ministry in our church. And it was super invasive to our family. We were it probably would have felt that way to the boys. They didn't get to move into Cole's room immediately, because we were letting other people use it. Or when it was time to be packing for them to go to college, instead we were like, hey, yeah, get your stuff together, do your best, but we're helping somebody who really needs our help right now. Yeah. So our focus is going to be elsewhere. It meant that we were sitting around and forcing everyone to come to every meal, so that we could talk and be hospitable to these students. But at the same time, it's the most prolific ministry I've ever been a part of. The Lord, Shang Lon, as an example, that's been 15 years ago. And, not a birthday, a holiday, or hardly a month goes by that I don't get a text with scripture from Chang Lon,
wow.
Encouraging me as a man of God or reminding me of God's promises. And this guy knew nothing of those things. And, God has taken him and used him, and he's involved in bringing others to know the Lord now. And so you sit there and you see things like that they were, you go into serving sometimes and you think to yourself, hey, I am going to bless these people. You see yourself as the giver of, and not the receiver.
Yeah.
But you look up and you're like, I gave nothing. What I gave was so small. And what the Lord blessed me back with in terms of relationship or, brothers, sisters, like the Bible says, when we leave these things, he will return them tenfold.
Yes.
And, we have a family of, Chinese students, which our boys look at as family. 2 of them have been married in our home.
Wow.
I would say they've all been baptized in our home, at our home. And, the Lord's just blessed that so tremendously. And, but that's, the cost really is nothing. But it's your time and it's your energy, and it's every Friday night for years we were going up teaching a Chinese Bible study, and I was like, man, it's on Friday night. That's like the we're going to unwind. We might go to
Right.
a movie. And instead we're giving that up like every single Friday. And,
Wow.
and then going to 2 services on Sunday because we were teaching a Chinese conversation class. And then whatever students we could get to go to service with us, they would come, and you go, and then lo and behold, they come to know the Lord. And then when their parents come to visit, their parents see a change in them. And, there are probably 2 or 3 of the parents that we baptized as well, and were able to bring to the Lord. We didn't do it. The Lord did it. But he just used that.
Yeah.
And so, I think when we avail ourselves to the Lord to serve, he
Does far more than you could ask or imagine.
yeah.
Yes, man, that's amazing. It's fun to hear those stories and of all the amazing things God does and all of the opportunity that's out there to serve. I think one of the questions that comes up very commonly for families is, but we're so busy. Like, Cole, I imagine you got 4 little girls, right? And if anybody has a reason not to serve in student ministry, you and your wife both serve in student ministry with 4 kids. How do you make that happen? I mean, you go, but we're just too busy to serve.
I love the question. And it's one that, if I'm being totally honest, my wife and I talk about a lot. It's like, man, we have a lot going on. Should we take on more? We want to make sure we're shepherding our family well and stewarding our resources well. And I think, what's really, whenever I think about that, it brings me back to giving. And I think about Randy Alcorn and the treasure principle, and something that he said, or a concept rather that he said in there was, if you don't tithe at 50,000, you're not going to tithe at 500,000. And so I just think about that from our family's perspective. It's like, hey, if we're not making serving a priority now, when we're less busy, we're still not going to make serving a priority. And so it's really not an optional thing for our family. And I will say, I think Greta and I, we really love and enjoy serving, and it's encouraged us in so many ways. It's been harder on our kids, us being gone, than it has been on us. I mean, there have been challenges for us for sure, but I think that's been the harder point. Right. And I think what's really cool about that is whenever they're so little, right? And so to me, anytime that Christine or Kimberly or even Bethany, my 3-year-old will say, hey, I don't want you guys to leave. I want you guys to be with us and hang out and play. It does open up just this awesome opportunity to share the gospel. And so I just think about, yeah, of course, everybody is busy, but when your kids are asking you, hey, why are you choosing to do this over me? That's kind of the question, like the root of the question, right?
Right.
And you get to really point it back to Jesus. And that's a really cool thing to do for your kids, right? Because you don't get those opportunities all the time. And so I think it's difficult. It's also, to me, it's really not just an option. It's, hey, if we're going to be about Jesus, we're going to serve. And it looks different times, for us. Sometimes we have capacity to do more. And we'll lean into that for sure. And sometimes it's like, hey, we're doing students and we can't add anything else right now. And that's something that you pray through. But I think, the other thing that I would just add to that is we're in Ephesians in men's Bible study, right? And, one of the verses that we went through just recently, Ephesians 5, I think I wrote it down, 15 through 16, it says, be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. And so the other thing that Greta and I challenge ourselves with is, okay, if we're really too busy to serve, let's put our week on paper just for what does a regular week look like. And then let's pray about, Lord, is there anything that needs to come off of this list if we're really saying that we're too busy to do anything? And generally, I can't think of a time where it's like, well, yeah, I know we got to do all of this stuff. We can't serve, right? That just hasn't really been the case. So yeah, it's a great question for sure.
That's good to even just sort through that, because I love what you said of, hey, if we're not making serving a priority, that's what it is. It's not about the total number of hours or how much free time you have or how many kids you have or any of that stuff. It's just, hey, is this a priority? And why is it a priority? And the thing I've heard y'all say over and over and over again is, this is just a natural response to what Jesus has done for us. I think of when Jesus washes the disciples' feet and he goes, man, I've given you an example. I've given you a perfect example that you should do to others just as I have done for you. And so what I hear y'all saying over and over again is it's not about doing this one devo or doing this one thing, but about living in response to the gospel, and serving is a natural response to the gospel. And so that makes a ton of sense. Another question I think would be helpful even just to work through is, how did you come up with ways to serve? Like if I want to do this, like, okay, I've been listening, I'm ready to go. I want to make serving a priority. I want to respond to the gospel. How do I do it? Do I just wait for my church to put a bunch of opportunities in front of me? Do I just go out there and figure it out? Like, do I Google serving? Like, how do I do it? Tell me, help me go practically step by step. What can I do to start serving?
I love that question because it's one of the things that I think Beth and I have struggled with at times, but definitely like opportunities that come through the church, especially when our boys were young, we would kind of seize those. So if there was a community group kind of day where we were out serving in the community, we would always sign up for that. We would make sure we cleared calendars. And that sometimes that was a forced situation. We'd force the boys to do that. Like, hey, you're going to have to come work at least from, for 3 or 4 hours. Like, just make them do something. But so there's opportunities like that. And I would say seize those. I know there's sports. I know there's so many things, but maybe sometimes you miss attending one of those, or, in the scheme of things, if you're not going to be a professional soccer player or football player, which like most people are not. Yeah. These are the kinds of things that have more eternal value. Yeah. Cole mentioned Randy Alcorn. He talks about, are you going to live for the dot, which is, our life, which is a hand's breadth, or are we going to live for the line, which is for eternal purposes and eternal things of eternal value? And people, you will never regret serving people. You just won't regret it. I mean, that's what Jesus came to do, and that's in all of us as a response to him. And so the other thing I think is just kind of maybe be very determined about it too. There was one summer, the boys were older, and Beth had decided, she declared it a summer of service. We called it, the boys were like, it's a SOS, but we were like, it's, and she went and found things to do that you could just look up that anybody could do. They served meals at Union Gospel Mission. We went to the Ronald McDonald House, and our boys will still talk about that. Remember that child we saw that had their face burned off, and how hard their family situation must have been. And, they will still talk about seeing that and walking away very thankful and very glad they did that. We went to Guatemala that year, and, our family like fully engaged. We did it with friends. We found another family. We did the summer of service with another family that had 4 boys. Okay. We had 3. And, the moms were just cracking the whip, cracking the whip the whole time. And,
you will do this with joy.
Yes, there were a few of those, but those trips and those things were really critical. I guess the main message would be, look around you, look for, elderly neighbors that just need help, and go ask them how you can help them. We've done that, do a food drive in your neighborhood. You can, we've put flyers in our neighbors' mailboxes, during COVID, and we did a food drive and ended up taking a whole bunch of food because the food banks were low on food. And we just thought that's something we could do. We're trapped in the house. What can we do? Yeah. And so, I think putting your time, dedicating the time, it is, I think it's a discipline. I think it's a spiritual discipline. And so, and one with a blessing, in it. And so most definitely, I think you have to be purposeful, but don't wait for somebody to present to you ways you can serve, and look around and say, I just don't have anything I can do. There are so many things out there, so many people in need of help, and that don't know Jesus, that we can, aligns with our vision here at CityBridge. What we're here to do is, share the good news, and, make disciples.
Yeah. And it's like you said, it's just a response. It comes naturally. There's things you can do where you can plan stuff out And then there's just, hey, do you just live that way? I think one of my favorite things I get to do with my kiddos, they're still little. And I've got a 6-year-old, my kids just had their birthdays, but 6, 4, and 2. And so they come with me anytime we're delivering a meal train. So it's like, man, we got drop food off to somebody's house. I'm like, great. I can, one, give my wife a break, let her get some good 45 minutes of alone, quiet time at the house. She can shower and things like that. And then I just load up the littles and we go. And so they have a blast running bags of Chick-fil-A and dropping it off on people's porch and then ding dong dishing them and running away and trying to hide in the car. Yeah. And they have so much fun with it. And I think there's just little things like that you can go, man, like you said, hey, look for opportunities. And it's, again, just going back to Cole, something you said of, yes, we've mentioned, hey, you got to force your kids to do this. But you said, man, you always got to see your parents doing it with joy. So it wasn't a, hey, you guys need to go serve. It is a, we are going to do this. And you served with your kids. You set that example for your kids, which is so helpful. I think kind of final question, because we could do this all day where I'm just working through how do you do it and what do you do and what does that look like? An interesting one is, so do I have to serve at church then? Like, what if I'm just, we're just going to bake cookies for every neighbor on the street and that's what we're going to do? Not that that's a bad thing, but is there any difference in helping teaching your kids that there's value in serving at your local church versus just serving in general as a way of life?
I would say, I said this a minute ago, but if there's an opportunity to serve, to come alongside and serve at your home church, 100% do it. Do it every time you can do it. For a couple of reasons. One, it's the body that you're part of.
Yeah.
And it's super biblical, right? For us to care for one another's, take care of each other's needs. Mm-hmm. So serving in the body, I think is really, really critical. I mean, that includes praying for others and taking the time to do that and making sure, let your kids be part of that, bring them into that.
Yeah.
Those are opportunities to sacrifice your own time and your energy to ask the Lord to intervene on behalf of somebody else. So definitely, I think the value of serving in your church body, it also builds relationships. And I think, for your kids to see you engaged with a church family, someday they're not going to be under your roof, and you're gonna hope and pray that they're engaging somewhere. And I think when that's been modeled for them, then they see what that can look like, and they understand the blessing that is. Thankfully we've seen Cole with his family. I love that he serves. It delights my heart to no end to watch what he and Greta do, or to hear about something they did. Or Sam and Abigail, they're the same way, serving their community group, leading in ways that draw people that have a new relationship with Christ, not being afraid to jump in with them. While we had probably what the Lord has done in their hearts is what's driven this, but certainly that we tried our best to model for them what we could, matters. And let me say, we have missed so many opportunities. Like, I can think, looking back at moments we had where we could serve, and thinking, wow, we could have done so much more than we did. Or was this or that really that important? We should have invested in some other things. Like, we have a lot of things like that. Looking back, we have done this, tried to be consistent, but we could have done it better. Yeah. Beth and I would both, I think, say that. But it's never too late to jump in and start doing it. That's what Jesus did for us.
Yeah. Yeah. That's helpful. As we kind of come to a close, we'd love for y'all just to do kind of a last, just what you would be your last encouragement to parents. Like, Kurt, if you could do if for the parents listening right now, how would you encourage them in serving and helping their family serve? And then, Cole, I think it's fun to have the unique opportunity of a child of someone that's already grown up, because I'm like, man, my kids probably aren't at an age where they have that retro, like that perspective to be able to look back. Morgan, your kids probably aren't at that age to have that hindsight to look back, and probably most of the people listening don't have kids that have grown up and then it's finally made sense, it's clicked, they're owning it, and they can look back and see the fruit. And so I'd love for you to even just share, like, what would you share with parents, right? Almost from a kid's perspective to go, hey, keep going. Like, your kids are going to grow up one day and probably say this if you invest in serving. So we'd love for y'all to just take turns doing that as we end the podcast. That'd be awesome.
There you go.
Sure. Yeah, I think, whenever I look at my kids, I have a memory that I actually go back to because Greta filmed it. So it's a video that I go back and I watch over and over and over again. But we've also jumped into Operation Christmas Child, and we just absolutely love it. And so I think our kids love it. And for us, we've been blessed to find things that our kids are very, very passionate about. And that's been just such a joy. And the video that I'm talking about is my second oldest daughter, Christine. She's putting her boxes together, and she's taking each box, and then she's taking her 3-year-old sister to the stairs, and she's bending down on her knees and getting her little sister and putting her arm around her, and they're praying over the box together. And to me, like, that just is, there's nothing that I want more. And I realize that they're seeing Greta and I pray over the boxes, and they're copying what we're doing. And so my charge would just be, model it, because it's not going to come back empty, right? I mean, it so will impact your children. And I can't think of anything else that I really want in life other than for them to grow up to want to have a relationship with Jesus that's truly an abiding, life-changing relationship, and then to share the gospel. And so I think that's just what I would say is, the more that you take your faith and your walk with Jesus seriously and put him first and model that to your kids, the more they're going to model that. And there's nothing, I can't imagine anything more fulfilling and rewarding than that. That's what I would say. Absolutely. It's been, and I'm just so thankful that it was captured on video, because I get to go back and watch it, and see it, because it's just super sweet. But yeah, that's all I have.
Man, I would just say, run really hard after Jesus, because this is when we recognize who he is and what he's done, and that settles in your heart and in your mind, the response is quite natural.
Yeah.
And so, pursue him with all your heart, and, give him all things, give thanks in all things, and let him care for you. He wants to do that. He does do that. And I think, how to serve and how to model will be much more natural, because our lives become more of a response to what Christ has done for us. And so, I mean, that would be my encouragement. Like, do those things. Those are more important than trying to nail the service discipline, or action. Like, it's way more important to have that relationship with the Lord. And I think the service follows, and when it's authentic, your kids know it, and they wanna be part of it. So
yeah, that's
love it.
So
exactly right.
Thank y'all, church family. Thank y'all for joining us on the Aiming Arrows podcast, and we will catch y'all next time.